Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Monomyth Diaries, a podcast where ordinary people get to share their hero's journey. I'm Mandy, and I'll be your host. We'll discover powerful insights, critical moments of growth, and much more. Thanks for joining us. We all have a monomyth to share, and someone out there needs to hear it. Welcome back to the Monomyth Diaries.
Thank you.
In our last episode, we left off with talking about how you had just been released from your 16th incarceration. Do you mind sharing with us what those weeks after being released look like?
Yeah. So after I was released that last time, my mom had come to pick me up, and my mom and my aunt and my cousin, actually, they come to pick me up out of jail, and we stopped at Destin for a few days to just kind of relax. And I think they were kind of also using it as some vacation time for them. But I just remember, my mom asked me, "What do you want to eat?" And the first thing that I wanted was pizza. And I don't remember this, but my mom remembers it very clearly and says that we went to a pizza joint, and I was so institutionalized that I'd ordered my pizza, but I went and sat at a completely different table by myself. I didn't sit with them. I didn't have any interaction with them. I just really wanted to be alone, and that was really what the majority of my time looked like when I was incarcerated. I was alone most of the time. And then when we got to Oklahoma, I went to go live with my mom, and she said, "Okay, you need to go to rehab, you need to go to a program, you need to do counseling." And I was just way too prideful. I was stubborn. I told her, I said, "I've been locked up. I don't need it. I don't want it. Not gonna do it." And she said, "Well, how about we join the gym?" We had to join the gym, and I had to go to church. Those were the two stipulations. So I was like, okay, I'll do that.
Were you pretty unhealthy at that point? Is that why she wanted you to join a gym? Or is it just something she was doing?
I think it was something she was doing.
She found helpful.
I mean, I was unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like, I gained a lot of weight when I was in jail, and, eating all that processed food. And
that makes me giggle because Donnell was on the show and he said the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. You do. And I didn't work out when I was locked up. And so I was definitely unhealthy, but I think it was more of a thing that she was doing. And my first visit in the gym was on a Saturday morning. I was on the elliptical for about 10-15 minutes, sweating it out, feeling good. And I remember getting really dizzy. So I went to go sit down on a weight machine, and I ended up passing out. I hit my head on the machine next to me. I was knocked unconscious, and I remember just waking up to this lady standing over me. And I remember her saying, "Don't move your neck, don't move your neck." And I remember thinking, what radio station is this? That was a whole scene. There was probably a dozen people standing around me at this point. They put me on a stretcher. They rushed me in the emergency room. I had $4,000 in medical bills and staples put in my head, and I hadn't even been out of jail a week yet.
Oh, that's a lot.
It was. Most people will be like, "Oh, that gym thing's not for me." But I thought, man, I am really unhealthy and I need to do something about this. So that was in 2007. By 2009, I had a personal training certification, and by 2014, I started competing in bodybuilding shows.
So you really got into this.
Yes, 100%.
And I think you told me that while you were bodybuilding, you also started studying to become a personal trainer. Is that right?
I was actually training before I became a bodybuilder. So I had started after I was released that last time, probably a few months after I started working at IHOP. Made some really great money at IHOP. Plug for IHOP. They really helped me gain some footing in my journey. After working there for a while, I was able to hire a personal trainer, and I started working with her, and she just really encouraged me and said, "Hey, you know what? I think you'd be really good at this." And so I looked into getting my personal training certification, had somebody that supported me to be able to get it. I was going through NASM, National Academy of Sports Medicine. They had sent me this book in the mail, this big old thick NASM book. And I just remember randomly opening this book to the anatomy section, and I see this word, and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I can do this. I am not smart enough for this. I can't pronounce that word. Nonetheless, know what it is, know the function. I can't do it. And I closed the book, and I remember just pushing it aside. And by this point, I had started going to church. I had recommitted my life to the Lord, and the Lord was really working on me in the sense of like, hey, come to me with your fears and your doubts and all that. And so every day I would pray, and I was journaling on a laptop. I wish I still had that laptop because it has so many prayers on there that I wish I could read today and see how many things God has brought to fruition since then. But I was journaling, I just remember praying every day through this journal and just asking God, like, help me to understand this. Help me to be able to apply what it is that I'm reading. And slowly but surely I would find myself studying more and more in this NASM book. I think I had like 9 months to take the test, but then I could file for one extension. So I filed for the extension, and it came time where I had to take the test. And so I went in and I took the test and I failed it. And the lady just really encouraged me, and she said, hey, you can retake this. Please come back. And so I went back 3 weeks later and I retook the test and I passed it. And I just remember, Mandy, like being in my car, crying like rivers of tears, holding the certification, like, God, not even 2 years ago I was homeless on the streets. Not even 2 years ago I was prostituting as a means of survival. I was in addiction, all these things. And here I hold this certificate that I get to help people on their journey to health and fitness. Like, it blew my mind.
Yeah. Some of God's promises and miracles already.
Yes.
You're starting to feel those.
Yes. So I started personal training in 2009, and in 2014 is when the bodybuilding journey began.
Okay.
And so I was at a gym in Oklahoma, and this trainer approached me and she said, hey, I see more in you than what I think you see in yourself. And I want to take you through my program for free. And this was a program that she charged her clients thousands of dollars to go through. So I went through it. And for 3 months, I had 2 cheat meals, which was on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and that was it. And when I saw what my body could do in those 3 months, it just motivated me to want more. Like, I want more. I want to do more of this. And so that's kind of how that journey into bodybuilding began.
And I think you told me at some point you reached a place where bodybuilding naturally wasn't enough for you.
Yeah, so the last time I was incarcerated, I remember this lady coming in and she was sharing her story with us, and it was a story of hope and redemption in her life. And I remember just listening to this lady, and I don't, honestly don't even remember what her story was. I just remember feeling hopeful by her story and feeling encouraged by it and thinking, if she can do it, I can do it. And when my bodybuilding journey began, I really felt like the Lord was speaking to me about going into prisons and to do the bodybuilding journey, to do it all natural, and then to be able to go into the prisons and show the girls like, hey, if I can do this, you can do it. It was kind of that give back thing that I wanted to do from this lady that I had heard her story about. And so that's what I wanted to do. The problem was that when I actually started bodybuilding and competing, and I saw what some of these other women were doing, I wanted to be the best of the best. And the best of the best, many of them were using steroids. And so I was like, well, I got to do that. If I'm going to compete with them, I've got to be on that level. So I started doing that. And then I just really wrestled with that for many years, because in the same time that I was on this journey of bodybuilding and kind of recreating myself, I was also going to church and trying to grow my relationship with the Lord. And so it was just kind of this wrestle back and forth for several years of like, is this wrong? Should I be doing this? God told me to do it all natural. I'm not doing it naturally. But yet I was seeing these amazing results, and I was placing very high in the competitions. And so it was just very challenging. And then I remember calling a friend of mine like years later, and she is a believer, and she was also in the bodybuilding industry. And so I just asked her, like, what is your opinion on Christian women using steroids in bodybuilding? And she said, well, let me ask you a question. When you see yourself naked, do you see yourself beautiful just as God had made you? It was just one of those things where she spoke to the depth of my soul in that moment. It was exactly what I needed to hear, because I couldn't see myself beautiful all natural. I thought I looked great when I was using steroids, but the minute I would try to taper off and I'd start to see more fat, I'd get back on and I'd amp up the dosage. And it was just what I needed to hear. From there, I was like, well, no, actually I don't, and I can't. So from there, I started to taper off and I got off steroids. And at the time, I was working in the supplement industry and working with nutrition, a very reputable company in the supplement industry, and doing really, really well for myself. And so when I started to taper off and stop doing that, that's when I really began to feel a shift. My shift from bodybuilding, my shift even in the supplement industry, like the Lord was shifting me out of that space. And I didn't know what the next looked like, but I knew that he was doing something. Mm-hmm.
And I think he does something when he moves you to Houston.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about that, because you say you're working for a supplement industry, and that's how you end up in Houston.
Correct. Yeah.
Let's go back to that.
Yeah. I was actually going to move to Waco, and then that didn't end up working out. And I was staying with some friends here in Houston. And while I was staying with them, the Lord just started opening up all these doors. I started having speaking engagements in the juvenile center and detention center, and I began mentoring. And then I was going to these big galas and, tux and gown galas. And I'm just like, how did I even get here? It was pretty incredible how God was moving in my life. And my friends, they knew that I was trying to get to Waco because Waco was center of my territory that I had. And so they're like, why would you move to Waco when God is obviously doing things for you here in Houston? And so I started looking for places in Houston, but everything was either in the hood or it was way over my budget. And I was having a hard time finding that in between place. And then I found this condo in Lake Conroe, and it was a little bit further than what I wanted, but I love the water. I think I mentioned that in our last episode. And I just remember for the first time, and really the only time I've ever audibly heard God in my spirit, and he said, "This is your home." And so I turned to my realtor, and I was just going to be renting this home, and I said, "Okay, I want to rent this home." And so she called me a few days later, and she said, "I have good news and bad news. Good news is you got approved for the rent. Bad news is the owners decided they wanted to sell it." I was really wanting stability in my life at this point, like I had never had it before. So then I called my mom, and I was just sharing with her about, what was going on. And she said, "Why don't you see if they'll do a rent to own?" And so I asked about doing a rent to own. They said no. But then, I just started pursuing being able to buy this house. And I didn't think it was possible. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the credit. I didn't have this. I didn't have that. But, when it's God's will, he just moves mountains and makes it happen. And for the first time in my life, I bought a house, bought this condo, and it was incredible. Wow. It was just, it was another one of those moments to think that, wow, God, so many years ago, I was on the streets, and here I've, bought my first home, and it's only through him that I've been able to do that. And so that was amazing. And so I just knew that God was calling me to Houston for a greater purpose, but still not really knowing what that was. And so I was still with the at the time. I was with them for several years, but then at one point I remember being on Instagram and just scrolling, and I saw an old pastor of mine from way long ago when I went to a Pentecostal church at one point of my journey to try to get out of my addiction. And I see this pastor, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's no way that's him. And so I click on his profile and come to find out him and his wife are senior pastors here in Houston. And this was in Monroe, Louisiana, almost 20 years ago. So I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And so I messaged him on social media, and I'm like, I don't know if you remember me. And he said, yes, I remember you. I baptized you. So that was really neat how God aligned all that to happen. And then from that, I was given the opportunity to share my story. And it was just, a minute of the low light and the highlights of my testimony on Easter Sunday at the Berry Center, where over 20,000 people were live and, within the 4 services. So that was like, that was one of those wow moments. And so much fruit, has come from that opportunity. But one of the things that happened from that was this man walked up to me after one of the services, and he said, hey, I really think we should connect. And he'd given me his card, and he was with a ministry called Eyes on Me here in Houston. And so I went home and I looked online and I looked to see what this ministry was about. I ended up meeting with him that week. And about a month later, I stepped down from my position with and I went into full-time ministry with Eyes on Me. And that was an incredible experience. And I learned so much through that ministry. And then I was with them for about 2.5 years. And I feel like I'm really getting ahead of your questions.
No, I love it. I was just going to back up a little bit. As part of Eyes on Me, you end up, I think, what you called backyard ministry? Is that what
missionary,
you called it?
A backyard missionary. Yeah.
Okay, tell us about that. Because
Yeah.
I find that absolutely fascinating. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah. So it's kind of this idea of like supporting missions across the border are great and they're needed. In other countries, it's definitely needed, but oftentimes we lack supporting our own backyard. There's so much need in our own backyard. And so that's kind of the heart behind Eyes on Me, is they want to place missionaries in inner cities of Houston. And so it's reaching the community through these backyard missionaries and community centers and stuff like that. So I was a missionary in Greens Point. It was really a great experience. I was, the only white female in an all black apartment complex. And I just felt like that show Cheers. Do you remember Cheers?
Yes.
Where everybody knows your name. Like I remember one time coming home and, this one guy standing on his patio upstairs and he's like, "Hey, Miss Ty," and another guy is sipping his 40 around the corner and he looks over and he's like, "Hey, Miss Ty," and it was just, they knew why I was there. They loved me and I loved them, and just met them where they were at, and it's just really modeling the love of Jesus with them. It was a really neat experience. And then COVID happened, and I spent a lot of time in the prayer closet in the apartment in Greens Point. And at that point, I knew God was doing another shift in my life. It was either starting a prison ministry with the church or potentially going to Uganda on missions for 2 years as a missionary in Uganda. And so those were kind of the two things that I was praying about. And then God said it was time to launch Misfits Mission. And Misfits Mission was birthed actually in 2010. Well, I say it was birthed. He gave me the vision for Misfits in 2010 behind a train track while I was sitting waiting for a train to pass. And he just downloaded this word misfits. And I said, "Misfits, where are you going with this?" And he said, "You used to be a misfit, but now you're misfit."
Oh, I love that. Very clever.
And I'm like, "Oh, yeah." And I just knew that was from him, because I'm not that clever. So I was like, "Okay, what do you want with this Misfits?" And he said, "To empower and encourage women that are or have been incarcerated, how to live a healthier lifestyle, physically, spiritually, and mentally."
Wow.
And I was like, "Okay, let's go." And he's like, "No, it's not time yet. Pump the brakes. I'm just giving you a little glimpse of what's to come." And that was in 2010. And that dream sat in the incubator for 11 years. And I was really just beginning to think that was just a great idea that's never going to come to fruition. And when I was at this crossroads in my life during COVID, the Lord he said it was time, through some of my community and support through another church. He said it was time to launch Misfits. And so we launched Misfits in 2021 under the umbrella of another ministry. And it started essentially as a mobile gym. So I was going into different women's homes all over Houston, rehab, sober living homes, transition homes. And I was taking these girls through workouts. And then after our workout, we would have an intentional time of discipleship. And I'd share stories with them. And we talk about how does a story relate to our life and what are some intentional goals that we can set in between now and next week when I see you guys again. And it was incredibly fruitful. Discipleship time was always my favorite time because, we just gather around and just the stories that were being told and the transparency of the girls. It was just so rich, our time together. And I did that for about 1.5 years. But if you know anything about Houston, you know how big it is. So
And
traffic, yes. And so I was driving 5 to 6 hours a day from one facility to the next. And a lot of these places didn't have a budget to donate to my services. So I was running myself into the ground, running my car into the ground. And I just knew this is not a long-term sustainable model for this ministry. And that's when he gave me the vision for The Hiding Place, which is inspired by Corey ten Boom's story. And so that's when I started praying and asking God, what are the next steps for Misfits Mission? And I know you've read The Hiding Place.
It touched me so much.
Yes.
I learned a lot from that book. The part about the fleas was my favorite.
It's a really super powerful story.
It really is.
And Corey's testimony and just what her and Betsy experienced in the concentration camp and how they just kept their eyes on the Lord the entire time. And they would say that there's no pit so deep that God is not deeper still. And that is the heartbeat of the hiding place. There is nothing that these girls haven't been through. There's nothing that they are currently going through or ever will go through that God is not deeper still. So we got the hiding place. It's a live-in 12 to 16 month discipleship home for women coming out of incarceration. And within that, they come into the home. We have 4 phases in place. We call them stanzas based off of our new song, Living. And so we just help them grow and develop in all areas of life to be able to reintegrate back into society and live out their God-given purposes.
And I think there were some pillars that they go through.
Yeah, we have 5 pillars in place: health and fitness, life and job skills, inner healing, which includes the recovery, 12 steps, and counseling, creativities, which is like art, music, riding horses, those kind of things, and then spiritual growth, which is our personal relationship with the Lord.
It's an amazing facility.
It's really special.
It is super special.
Yeah.
And I think you have something else in the works, Grace and Grit.
Yeah, so that's a future big dream, big prayer. As a nonprofit, we're ran solely off donations, and so really hoping to be able to have a for-profit to help support the nonprofit one day. And what better for-profit than to have a gym? And so the name of the gym, the Lord's already given it to me, Grace and Grit, and so we're hoping that will come to fruition sooner than later.
Do you mind if we circle back to your faith? In the first episode, you talked a little bit about you had a brief introduction from a friend who had taken you to church. And then another introduction when you're living with your dad when you're a little younger, as you mentioned, the Pentecostal church. And then you're introduced to it again with your mother. Do you mind walking us through a little bit about your journey to faith? Because I remember when you and I talked, you said that your growth in your faith really happened when you had some people disciple you, which has been a kind of a new word for me. I have another friend of mine who used that the first time in one of these podcasts for me because I'm a relatively new Christian. And I was like, what does that even mean? Right? And so do you mind telling us a little bit about your walk in faith? Because I think it's a big tool, right? For you to stay sober, to do all the things that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I really believe that when I was 12 and I was invited to church and I had accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior, I believe that the Lord gave me the Holy Spirit in that moment, even though I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the decision I had made. There was nobody coming alongside of me saying, do you understand what you just did, the decision that you made? Can I mentor you? Can I disciple you? And so I would go back home, back to darkness, back to dysfunction, all the things. And I don't remember if I shared it in the last podcast, but it's just this idea of like eventually the darkness overpowered the light. I only saw a little bit of light for 2 hours once a week when I would go to church on Sunday. But I wholeheartedly know without a shadow of a doubt that that decision is what kept me alive when I was on the streets, because I had some very real
near-death
experiences. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. And then in part of my addiction, as you had mentioned, I had gone to live with my dad and I was going to this Pentecostal church. And I, at the time, was thinking if I could just change my environment, that I would change. I wasn't willing to deal with anything internally. I just wanted to change the external things, thinking things would get better.
Yeah, I always call them an external solution.
Yeah.
Or a geographical solution.
I love that. Geographical solution, 100%, and it didn't work,
Yeah, it never worked for me either.
Yeah, it wasn't long before I ended up finding the next high and getting the next hit and doing what I had to do, what I was used to or what I knew. But I believe even being at that church, being at that Pentecostal church, there was things that the Lord was doing in me that I didn't know. I didn't know he was at work until later. So then I started recommitting my life to the Lord in 2007 when my mom said I had to go to church in the gym. And even still, there was nobody saying the word disciple. There was nobody to mentor me. So I would just go to church every Sunday and I was trying to do the next right thing. But oftentimes the next right thing was not the next right thing. And so I stumbled a lot along the way. But I just kept showing up. And I think that's part of my journey is I just had to keep showing up. I just had to have faith that God was doing something through me showing up. And he very much was. And then when I moved here to Houston and God put me in a family of believers and through Eyes on Me began to learn about this word disciple and what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and what it means to disciple others as part of the Great Commission. And so that's really where my faith has grown, is through that, is through my family believers here in Houston, and just walking it out with them, really, and then beginning to model it for myself and then be able to teach it to others.
And now you're doing that. So faith has been a giant tool for you. What else have you done? For me, I have a lot of affiliation with 12-step programs. And I think you mentioned that you did that for a little while, but I think you've done some other things. Do you mind sharing some of the other tools that you've used to heal, to transform?
Yeah, so I think obviously health and fitness has been a big part of my recovery and what God used to heal me, to heal my brain. There's a lot of science and studies behind what exercise does for the brain and how you're able to recreate new neural pathways through exercise. So that was I think that's a huge tool that God gave me. But another one I would say that was really a pivotal shift in my walk with the Lord was a curriculum that I went through called Freedom. And it's a staple in the hiding place. The girls have to go through it because, I was saved, but I wasn't set free. I was still under so much shame and condemnation from my past. And, these tattoos that you see, and, when I was bodybuilding and I was getting more ink, it was really an identity issue at the root of it all. I felt like if I can just cover my body in tattoos, put on some muscle, cut and color my hair, nobody will ever recognize me for who I used to be. And I didn't know that that was shame that I was really being consumed by. I was living in this space. And when I went through Freedom, I could put a name on it and I could identify it for what it was. And then once I was able to do that, I was able to do something about it. And going through that curriculum, like I said, it was literally a pivotal shift in my walk with the Lord. So now I can say I'm saved and set free. And I am staying free.
And Freedom is a faith-based curriculum.
Correct.
Is it something that you did as a class or on your own? How did that work? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was through a church, through Hope City Church. But I know that there's other churches that offer either the same curriculum or something very similar. I mean, it's a very well-known curriculum.
All right. Do you mind sharing with us about your mom, your relationship with your mom? When you were younger, that was challenging. And then she practiced tough love with you. And you all didn't have any communication for a long time. You mentioned that her heart softens and she comes to collect you after your last incarceration. And you're doing church and you're working out together. What is your relationship with your mom today like?
It's good. It's good. Yeah. My mom still is in Oklahoma and she's retired. And so she's just living life and it's good. I'm very grateful for my mom. If it wasn't for her giving me that chance, I would have gone back to the streets and I wouldn't be here today. I would either be in prison or I would be dead. So very grateful for that opportunity that she gave me.
Yeah, grateful for mom. Okay, well, how do you hope that your Monomyth is going to uplift others?
I just want to be an encouragement and a light to others, especially to women that have or are going down the same path that I have been through. And I hope that they can hear the story of what God has done in my life and that they can glean hope for that for their own life.
I think about how that woman, when you were incarcerated, shared her story and how much it changed her life. The power of sharing testimony can encourage others.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're doing the same thing she did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Revelation it says that we overcome by the power of the blood and the word of our testimony. So, I think there's a lot of power in sharing.
I agree. Yeah. Which is what we're doing here on the Monomyth Diaries.
That's right. Yes. So very thankful for this opportunity to be able to share. Thank you for creating Monomyth Diaries.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, we end every single episode with an attitude of gratitude. It's your opportunity to uplift anybody in your life who's been a hero, a mentor, people who have changed the trajectory of your life in some way. Who would you like to lift up today?
Definitely would like to lift up my spiritual parents, Guy and Kelly Caskey. They have been transformative in teaching me what it means to be a disciple of Jesus and the importance of modeling that out for others, with love being the strategy of it all. So very grateful for them, grateful for my best friend Kristen that has walked alongside of me for the past, 5 years. We've been through a lot together. She's a very, very, very big part of my life. And then, of course, my husband and my family, my new family. My husband is super supportive of me and this ministry, and he's just been such a blessing. He's the backbone of my family and our family. So I'm very grateful for that.
Anybody else?
I mean, I could, but that would be like that'd be a whole nother podcast just talking about people that we're grateful for.
Okay. Well, if people want to know more about Misfits Mission or the hiding place, how will they find your information?
You can go to www.misfitsmission.org. There's all the information on there. There's also a contact us page on that. So definitely can learn more there.
And we'll make sure that we drop all of that information in the show notes for you.
That's great. Thank you.
Again, I truly appreciate you coming back and doing this again.
Yes. Yes. My pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome. As we close Tyler's journey, we've witnessed how a life once marked by pain and brokenness has been transformed into a mission of restoration and hope. Through Misfits Mission and the Hiding Place, Tyler is helping women write new chapters, stories of freedom, faith, and purpose. Her example reminds us that even the darkest seasons can give way to light. Thanks for joining us on the Monomyth Diaries. If this episode resonates with you or someone you know, we'd love for you to share it and spread the inspiration. Don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube to stay connected. We'd appreciate if you could take a moment and rate and review the podcast. It helps us reach more people with stories of transformation and growth. You can visit us at monomythdiaries.com or text us directly from the show notes to reach out and keep the conversations going. Until next time, heroes, let's journey together through our monomyths.